let's get started with first edition of Incredible Rail Journeys. I'm really excited about this one. I am a train buff. I've loved trains since I was a kid. I was one of those kids that had a model railroad at home. I loved playing with trains. I loved to, every time we would drive somewhere in the city, we'd come to a railroad crossing. I'd be praying, itching for the train to go by. So anyway, let's start our preamble. For those of you who are new to us, new to Wheel and Anchor, thank you for joining us this morning. Just a quick note about who we are at Wheel and Anchor. We are a community of travelers from all across Canada. And our mantra, the reason that we came into existence is because I have a real passion and a desire to bring travelers together. Travelers as identified people who are looking for those experiences in the world that sort of give us a better understanding about each other and about other cultures, traditions, and so on all over the place. And when you do that with a bunch of people who are like-minded, you just have a lot more fun and it's a more fulfilling experience. That's been my what I've learned having been in this business for 30 years, believe it or not, as of next year. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. And I think that anybody that has participated on our trips will find that we have a great time. My personal goal for all of you is to become well-traveled and well-connected. And so for a lot of people, well-traveled is, checking off the bucket list. We all have them. I have one as well. But I think it goes without saying that being well-traveled is really more about immersing yourself in those cultures, in those experiences, in the food and the wine and all that great stuff. And then coming back sort of enriched as a person. And along the way, you get connected to people, not only the people that you're traveling with, because again, we're all like-minded travelers, but also the people that you meet along the way. And when you travel by train in particular, it's a somewhat closed environment. So, you'll invariably meet people from the local country in some cases. On our trains, though, some of the programs that we're doing and thinking about doing, they're chartered trains. But even so, there'll be Europeans on board or folks from anywhere in the world, and you have that, you share that common experience, and it's just a great way to travel. So without further ado, let me introduce our team this morning. My name is Gordon. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor, and I will be your host. And I'm joined in the background by Joel and Paula, my colleagues, who will be answering your questions and monitoring the chat box, making sure everything goes smoothly. And our special guest, without further ado, the gentleman, the only one that you can see in the box there, that's Tim Stark, coming to us from Berlin, Germany. You are in Berlin today, is that right?
That is right. Hope you can hear me.
All right, cool. So I've known Tim for a number of years, and Tim is with us this morning because he has done all of these trips multiple times in most cases. So he has a vast knowledge about all these trains. So he's going to end up doing most of the talking on our webinar today because, this is Mr. Train as far as I'm concerned. We had some great chats about it. And always a pleasure to deal with Tim and his team. One thing about, trains in Germany, you know what they say, right? It's like a German train. It always runs on time. So if you're going to go on a program on a train somewhere, you want it to be run by the Germans because, nothing is going to go wrong. Isn't that right, Tim?
Well, I'd have to, the saying here in Germany goes, well, we hand it to the Swiss. We say, so if something's really punctual, then it's a Swiss train, not a German train. We take the credit if you want.
Okay, fine. Well, we can certainly say that trains in Germany run probably a lot better, a lot more reliable than the ones in Canada, but let's not talk about that. Let's, because we're not talking about trains in Germany or Canada today. We're talking about some other very exciting trains. First of all, our agenda for today is it's really all about us train buffs. I'm going to call you all train buffs who are interested in some of the world's most incredible train journeys. We're bringing 3 of them to you today, and I am a total train aficionado, which is why I'm going to be doing the hosting, but actually a lot of listening because Tim is going to explain a lot to us today. And we're going to look at 3 programs today. The Orient Silk Road Express in Central Asia. We're going to be looking at the Al-Andalus train, which is a super luxury train in Spain, as well as the iconic Trans-Siberian Railway. So that's what's on the agenda for today. Before we get into that, just a couple of thoughts. And Tim, I want to get your feedback on this too. As I was saying at the outset, train travel is sort of all of a sudden coming into vogue again. I've seen numerous articles written about it. You see more and more train journeys coming up, new and different destinations. I know that Tim and his team have been coming up with some new programs in recent years that didn't really exist before. There's a lot of interest to it. And you know, for me, I think some of our members have made the comment as well, just the fact that you travel overland, you don't have the stress and hassle of driving, you can move around and you know, get a drink or grab dinner, all the while traveling through, you know, beautiful countryside. That is undoubtedly the main reason that it's so compelling. But I think safety is an issue too. You know, trains are, you know, statistically speaking, a lot safer than even traveling by road or by plane. And so, you know, we don't maybe think about that so often. But what else, Tim, in your experience? I mean, this is you live and breathe trains all the time. But what do you think is making train travel so compelling these days, apart from that?
Well, Gordon, I think it's basically two. I'd like to think of it in 2 ways. One is certainly the point that you touched on. It's the comfort level. It's certainly different than traveling by coach, for example. You can get up, you can walk around. You have a restaurant car. That's all very different than biting in your sandwich on a coach with 40 people next to you. That's one thing, and you can cover a lot more distance by being in such a way comfortable. Also traveling overnight. And the other thing, the other aspect I think is that the last, say, maybe 20 years, where air travel has become so well, all over the place, and everyone can fly. You know, cheap flights were available until short this year in Europe, all over the place, also in other parts of the world. That we all got too much used to getting on a plane, and then you know, 2 hours or 3 hours later you get off, and you're in a completely different place. And by train travel, you actually get more a feel of how far it is, how the landscape changes, how much, you know, how much difference there is between each area. And that also, I think, makes a lot of enchantment, if you will, from train travel.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that all of those points make a lot of sense. I kind of look at it, you know, looking at it from a travel industry perspective, is that train travel is kind of like the small ship or the expedition cruise of you know, that's coming up now. I mean, before you wanted to go all those unique places and you went on a smaller and smaller ship, or, you know, a river cruise. And now with train travel, you know, opening up all these different places. And again, a lot of these routes have been around forever, right? But at the same time, the interest level, the appeal is new. So anyway, let's move on to our first destination we're going to talk about. By the way, if you have questions as we go along, please type them in the chat box. We're going to try to grab them on the fly, because we are going to be addressing 3 different parts of the world, 3 different itineraries. And so, you know, we'll be providing a lot of information. So we'll try to answer your questions as we go. First of all, we're going to look at the Orient Silk Road Express. Now, this particular journey takes place in Central Asia, which I think is interesting, because this is one of those parts of the world that you just don't get to. I mean, you know, we're talking about Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, all the Stan countries, as we like to call them. And there's just not a lot of travel in this area, partly because travel is challenging there. So we're going to touch on the experience of the Orient Silk Road Express And Tim's going to tell us a little bit about the train, and we'll talk about a few of the highlighted destinations along the way. There are numerous itineraries in this area, so this particular one that where you see the map here isn't the only one. And again, depending on what we plan for the future, we may do this or a variation of it. But let's have a look at the train itself. And Tim, this train, this is originally Russian rolling stock, is that correct? Or Soviet rolling stock, is that fair to say? And
yeah, it's actually it's a mixture. It's Soviet stock, if you will. So reliable like nothing else.
yeah,
Made for surviving atomic wars. But other than that, no, it's a mixture between basically what they nowadays still have in Russia and some parts Uzbek. It's also so originally from Central Asia. You can tell it's a little bit different, but they're all based on the same gauge and on the same layout, basically.
yeah, exactly. When you go to the inside, this is when all of a sudden you'll see a big difference to trains in frankly any other parts of the world. Is this the decor? Now, I wouldn't necessarily put this in my house, but my house isn't in Uzbekistan. But I frankly love it because I mean, this is part of what makes you feel like the part of the world that you're actually in. Tell us a little bit about the inside of the train itself and how the train is configured and so on and so forth.
The train mainly, as you can see, I mean, it's for European or Canadian eyes. It's quite colorful, and let's say there's a topic, you will see that all over the country with the turquoise decor or violet, because it pops up in mosques and all of these madrasas that you see along the way. So that topic gets taken up by that. And other than that, I think we all say Central Asia and we think it's Soviet, and which it was for a long time. But culturally, this is much closer to on one side on what we nowadays would say it's Chinese and it's Asian, and on the other hand, it's more Oriental. What you will say, it's Iranian, and Tajikistan, in fact, is a Persian-speaking country and not by any means linked to the other ones. And then you have Turkish influence. So it's a little bit of that, very, very different than the Russian Soviet style, of course.
Yeah, for sure. And so on this train, typically, what kind of carriages do we have on it? So we've got sleeping compartments, sleeping carriages like the one that you see here, and we've got the dining car. And as I understand it, those are the main. That's pretty much where guests would spend their time while on this journey, is between the dining car, which serves as a lounge, as a lecture hall. It's sort of a multi-purpose type thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, all of our trains are set up in much the similar way. So you have obviously the carriages with the sleeping compartments. So the compartments that everyone who takes this train has. It's their compartment. They can make it up as they want to. You return to it every time. And so, for example, here you see the ALADIN category, which is a lower two-berth, two-person cabin with a sharing shower bathroom at the end of the carriage. And then we do have the other categories that we get to along the way. For example, the dining car. Here you have the KALIF category. Certainly you can tell by the interior, it is Uzbek. Many lines, many Oriental ornaments. This, in fact, is a private bathroom type. So you see the door on the left-hand side is leading to the bathroom, which is quite a spacious one with a full-size shower. So not a shower cabin, it's actually like a not with a piece of cloth, but like a proper.
It's actually a glass shower door kind of thing.
Actually, a glass shower. There you go. And so on the other side, you have what you would call probably a bunk bed, because it's an upper downer, because you have to have the other side free for the bathroom. And it's quite spacious. So you have these ones as the setup, and then you have the restaurant car, or restaurant cars. It depends on how many people we have. Mostly we do have at least 2 dining cars, because we all want to have one sitting. We don't want to have, a split sitting where someone has to take dinner
Right.
at a time where they don't want to, because it's at 6 o'clock. It's barely dinner time. And some people would have a problem if you say, well, your space is 9:30 or something.
Right.
So we always carry enough restaurant cars to have one sitting. And that restaurant car can be used before or after, mostly after, to sit, have drinks, have talks, play games, have,
Right.
speak together. There is no lounge car on this one, simply because it's hard to find lounge cars in Russia or Central Asia. But also because, and we get to that later, you have a lot of program, you have
Right.
a lot of time off the train. So there's only so many hours in a day.
And I think that is really the point. Is that and perhaps you could give us an overview of what is a typical day on board the train, because I think one of the misconceptions, and it obviously depends on the journey, is that you're sitting in the train staring out the window for hours and hours and hours on end, and that's just not the case.
No, in fact, it's not. We time the tours in a way that, we try to give the tour the necessary means in terms of traveling on the train. When we travel a piece of the journey where it's actually landscape-wise or anything, that you travel by day, so you can actually have the comfort to sit and watch the world go by, if you will.
Mhm.
And if we have to cover terrain, which in some of the cases in the Central Asia, not as much as on the Trans-Siberian, but we have to make some miles sometimes. That will be done during the night, and this is actually the nice setup on these tours, that you travel during the night, so you have like a little bit rickety rockety, during the sleep. But you wake up every day and you get off every day with some sightseeing. So usually in the mornings between 7 and 8:30 you have breakfast, or 9 if you will, and then around 9, 9:30, 10, when we arrive at the destination, you get off, have a sightseeing tour, mostly until late afternoonish, and then you get back to the train, get on, and off we go for the next one, and have dinner on the train. This is how it usually goes. There are some days a little bit different, but this is the
But
main.
that's the general thing, and so I
Yeah,
think that's the key point, so that you're off exploring during the day,
exactly.
with some exceptions, obviously. I know the question's going to come up that you said rickety rockety. How rickety rockety is it? I personally find it lulls me to sleep. I mean, I don't know. I'm out cold in about 2 minutes on these trains, but what what is your experience? What do people say about sleeping at night on the train?
Certainly, it is different for everyone that I know, but mainly my feel, and I have done these trains numerous times, it kind of like falls into 2 categories. The ones that say, I feel like a baby, where you get these reminiscences of getting rocked into sleep, and they said they just fell asleep in no time, and it was nice. And they're the ones that need a little time to adapt, like the first couple of nights, maybe a little bit, because it's different. Just to rectify maybe a misconception. These trains that we're talking about here, they're not fast trains by any means.
Right.
They will go at a speed, say the Trans-Siberian goes around 80 kilometers an hour. This one goes even a little less sometimes, mainly because the tracks are what they are.
Right.
In Central Asia, in particular, this is a part of the world where you have the highest difference in temperature from day to night. Sometimes in the winter, of course, where we don't go, but in the summer with heats that have above 30 Celsius almost every day. So the tracks, they will, you will notice they will have the rocking feel to it. So this is why the train actually goes between 60 and maximum 80, in order also to smoothen it up.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
after a couple of days, even the ones that say, had a little bit of problems in the first night. They will rock to sleep, and in the end, they will be at odds with a hotel night.
Oh, perfect. That's perfect. Okay, great. Let's touch on a couple of the highlights of the stuff that we're going to see along the way. And I think you get a sense of the landscape when you look at the picture here. It's a lot of desert, a lot of very arid landscape, some spectacular mountain ranges. But I want to touch on a few of the cities that now, depending on the program, because different ones start in different places. But this particular one begins in Almaty, right, which is the main city of Kazakhstan. I don't think this is where Borat comes from. I think he's from a smaller town, right?
I hope he is. No, no, he's not. Now, this is actually the biggest city in Kazakhstan. Also, one of the most modern. If you discount what they've done with the new capital, Nur Sultan. But this one actually has also a lot of history, being the link between China and what used to be the steppes of the Kazakh Empire, or the Central Asian empires, which were linked to Mongolia a long time ago. So you have here a mix of eclectic, I should say, between really modern architecture that you would find in maybe Vancouver as well, but then the mix with, you have Russian wooden houses in some parts,
Mm.
and it's the best connecting way into the area, because there's a lot of intercontinental flights.
And that backdrop with those mountains in the background, I mean, that's the part that sort of, as you say, when you say Vancouver, I mean, it's sort of reminiscent of what we see in the west coast of Canada. Different. There's
Yeah.
no ocean in nearby.
Far from it. I mean, you're in a part of the world where you travel through some of the most landlocked countries.
Yeah, absolutely. That being said, when you travel down into Kyrgyzstan, you come to this Lake Issyk, which and I'm personally a big fan of these alpine lakes. This is one of the largest in the world, I think, just after Lake Titicaca. And this is a massive lake. It's a saline lake, as I understand it, right? So it's salty, not as salty as like the Dead Sea, but nonetheless a salty lake, because I guess lots of rivers flow in, but it just doesn't go anywhere. It basically just evaporates. So
yeah. It's not as salty, or far from it, from the Dead Sea, but it's not a sweet water lake like Lake Baikal in Russia, for example.
right.
Because it's very shallow, or rather shallow for the size it has. Yeah, you're right. It's one of the largest. I think it's the second largest, as you put it, alpine lake, and it's the main source, so to speak, in an otherwise arid landscape in Kyrgyzstan. And what we do is we come from Kazakhstan down to Kyrgyzstan, and then we actually follow a very panoramic track for a couple of hours along the mountain range to the lake itself, before we then head off to the capital Bishkek. And that gives us a little bit of an idea how diverse that area is, because later we're gonna see much less water and much more desert. Yeah.
Much more desert. And so from there, from Bishkek, then we head over to into Uzbekistan, and Samarkand, as I understand, is really one of the highlights, frankly, of the entire region, not just on this particular trip. And this part is unfamiliar to me, but tell us why Samarkand in particular is such a beautiful city.
Samarkand, I mean, that's the jewel of probably of these journeys, be it with the train or without the train. Samarkand used to be one of the main stops on what used to be the Silk Road, the trading route between China and Europe, with all the Marco Polo history that you will believe or not. But this was actually a touching point of cultures and religions, and this is why in Samarkand you have still many remnants of that particular history. Be it there's a huge bazaar, and then you'd have madrasas and mosques like you see here, In the background, you actually see that turquoise dome of a mosque that I was referring to earlier. And this square, first time I was on it, I was blown away, I have to say, because in something like this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and because it's an area in the world where it's much less visited than than stuff in Europe or North America or Asia. You'd have, if this was in Europe, this would be like Venice. You'd be queuing up for hours in order to get in. And here you have groups of 10, 20, 15 people, and there's basically what you see here. This is how crowded it's going to get. And there's many sites like this, but we spent there 2 days, and you wished you'd had more time. I can assure you that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what I understand about Samarkand. But we do get 2 full days there, which I think makes it well worthwhile. One of the other stops along the way in a different part of Uzbekistan, of course, Bukhara, another important stop along the Silk Road. What is Bukhara so known for?
Bukhara is known for, basically it's our last stop into or from Uzbekistan into Turkmenistan, or the first stop into Turkmenistan if we go the other way. Bukhara is a much livelier city than Samarkand, because it's slightly bigger. It's known for pottery, and it is the place where people start to get the hang of the bazaars and to look at the pottery or the all the silk produce that they have, and also the huge mosque that you see in the foreground here, which is all one area, that kind of like makes it a cultural place. So this is also where people get out and have nightlife, if you will. So it's much more lively than Samarkand.
Yeah, and then contrasting that, we end this trip in Tashkent, which is of course the capital of Uzbekistan. And as I understand it, contrasts quite a bit. I mean, it's certainly got these old monuments, like you see the quite famous Friday Mosque, but it has a very modern part to it as well. In fact, I think Tashkent is one of the most fast-growing cities in that whole region.
Yeah, Tashkent. This is where we end one version of the journey. In others,
Right.
You'll end. Yeah. Well, Tashkent is the biggest city in Uzbekistan. It's actually 6 million. It doesn't look it, but it has, as you said, a more modern part of the city. And then there's also a huge part of the population is Russian, as you would expect it from Moscow or St. Petersburg. So you have the typical Orthodox churches as well, beside this one, and then the very modern touch of modern buildings. And yeah, so you can see that these countries are not as backwards as we sometimes make them to be, because they're
and that's part of the experience, of going to this part of Central Asia is that you kind of go and you're sort of blown away, because I think we sort of picture them all riding around in horses and carriages, and that's not the case at all. They're quite advanced societies. Summing up the Orient Silk Road Express, and we were talking about this the other day about what are the main reasons to go. And I think that we said one of them, Samarkand. I mean, just visiting Samarkand in and of itself has to be a compelling reason to visit this part of the world.
It's certainly. You mentioned it in the introduction. It's a part of the world where I say, there's not a lot of white spots on the map worldwide. Everything's been traveled on, and everyone knows pictures from it. But other than the Arctic regions, this is a part of the world where people would say, well, everyone knows Southeast Asia or Europe or Africa, but this is a part of the world where it's hard to get to. There's not a lot of flights. There's actually not a lot of traffic, and so that's the first one. The second one would be, it's the easiest way to get around in these 4 or 5 countries that you talked about. Because otherwise, traveling by road in this part is very bumpy. You have dust roads all over the place, and to get from one country to the other, it's actually more, it's way more comfortable by train than using airlines along the way in parts of the world where you probably haven't heard of airlines.
Right.
That's the one. And then of course, you see in 14 or 15 or 16 days, depending on the program, as much of the cities and the places or the natural reserves than what you would have in maybe two of these tours by coach,
Right.
in one go. So
Exactly. And to your point as well, I think that it's a part of the world that, if one is going to undertake going there, you'll probably only go once. It's not like going to the Caribbean. We're not going to go every year for a summer holiday. So why not see what you can? Yeah. Fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great. Terrific overview. Just to our members, as we normally do with these, a quick poll. Again, this is not committing to anything, but we're just curious. What do you think about this trip ideas? It sound interesting. Would you be interested in seeing details if we put a program together, or no, I'm not interested? And so please take a moment and answer that question. And it just helps us because, as all of you know, I've said it 1,000 times, we are member driven. We go where you want to go, not where I want to go. And so it's helpful for us to get a sense of what appeals to our members. So yeah, if you didn't already, please click on that, and then we'll take a detour back over to Western Europe. I think we can close that poll now, Joel. And we'll take a detour back over to Western Europe and take a look at a completely different rail experience, the Al-Andalus. And so just to preface this, if you were to categorize trains, you have sort of regular passenger trains that we all jump on and off and buy tickets and so on and so forth, like you'll find all across Europe. And then you'll have comfortable trains, private trains that are designed with sort of functionality in mind and really have all the comforts and provide a terrific experience. And then you will have luxury train journeys. And I would put the Orient Express, the Venice Simplon Orient Express into that category. And I would put here the Al-Andalus into that category as a luxury train. And this one goes between, and I'll just answer Chris's question, the Orient Silk Road trip is not yet available. So that program is something we are contemplating for 2022 in all likelihood. It all depends on what happens in the world over the course of 2021. We are going on the Trans-Siberian next year. And then I would say we will probably do one or more of these trips in 2022. And we'll have details for that. But of course, as I say, that's why we're finding out if people are interested in it, then we'll plan to go. So coming back to Al-Andalus, this train goes all the way from northwestern Spain, from Galicia down to the Mediterranean, well, not quite the Mediterranean coast, but down to Seville. And as I say, it's a super luxury train. So take us on a tour of the train, Tim. And this one does have a lounge car.
Not only one, it has several lounge cars. Actually, it has a bar car and a lounge car. The lounge car that you see here, so you can already see this is much more what you have from the movies, what you have from Murder on the Orient Express, or the likelihood. So we do this without the murder, but with a lot of good wine and good food. Which is also part of it. So you have the restaurant cars with style, as it should be in Spain. You'll have 4-course meals and a nice wine list along the way. And you have every cabin has ensuite, so you have your private showers everywhere, and they're also quite spacious. So some of these carriages are about 10 square meters, which for a train is a big cabin. Here you have an example of the restaurant car, the dining car. So you have a setup where you have actually couples on one side and then groups of 4 on the other side. to just make it possible, also a little bit more private dinner. And as I mentioned before, you can see the wine glasses. So that was for me one of the. I love Spain. I love the whole Mediterranean region in Europe, and Spanish wines are quite something. And you'll taste some of these along the way, because obviously it's linked to the areas that we travel through. So from the north to the south, you'd say you start with white wine and then you go into red, or vice versa.
And so Fran, so asked the question actually if all the meals are included in the program. Yes, with all of these training programs, all of the meals are on board. So I shouldn't say they're all on board. They are all included in the program. Most of them are on board, but of course, if you're on an excursion that's off the train, then it won't be on the train. It'll be provided. So taking a look at the cabins again, you mentioned the spaciousness of the cabins. Again, this is very, very different than the experience in Central Asia or on the Trans-Siberian, for example. You do have sumptuous compartments.
Yep.
Give us the overview, please.
This is a junior suite, which is the bigger cabin. So that's actually the 10 square meter cabin that I was talking about. During the day, it is a nice, spacious couch. So you have a smaller couch on the side that the photo was taken on, and on the right-hand side, you'd have the entrance to the bathroom. This folds back to a full square 2 by 2 meter double bed for 2 people, obviously. And you have in one carriage, you have only 4 of these cabins. So it's actually, you can tell by the way, usually you would have much more or many more cabins in one carriage. Right. Here you only have 4, and that also gives you an idea of what it is all about. Also the wooden paneling, that's the scheme that you've seen on the dining car. So that is all in style. Let me just refer to, because there was the question earlier with the meals. Also, the excursions are all included. So that maybe comes up later. Excursions are all included as well. So that's the part you don't have to worry about.
And on the Trans-Siberian, and all of these programs, obviously the alcoholic beverages are not included, but water and coffee and tea and so on is part of the program.
Yeah, exactly. So water, tea, coffee is always included, the basics, and then it's on consumption, much like on cruise ships, what you know.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this suite here is still not quite as large as the junior suite, but as you can see, still plenty of room, large beds. All this folds down at night, just very, very comfortable accommodation. I mean, that's really what the luxury train experience is all about. There is a bit of there is undoubtedly a bit of a price difference between junior and superior suites on these. I mean, these kind of programs are not inexpensive for sure. Your per diem, your per day cost on a luxury train journey is going to be undoubtedly higher than it is on something like the Silk Road Orient Express or the Trans-Siberian. So again, give us the rundown of a day on board the Al-Andalus. We'll touch on a couple of the cities that were, but is it the same? I think you were saying to me the other day that here you also spend a lot of time touring around. So
it's because it's the overall distance from Santiago to Seville or vice versa is not anywhere near what you have between Moscow and Beijing, obviously, where you cover 2 continents, if running down on it. We've timed it in such a manner that during the night we don't travel at all sometimes, or very little. So the train actually stands still. You don't have the rickety-rockety. Some may say it's good. Some may say they lack of it. So you have during the daytime, you'd have that feeling to travel on the train and the world goes by. And again, the same thing, you have breakfast on the train, and then we get to a place, you get off, we have the excursion, and then mostly late afternoonish, we get back on, or sometimes we even have lunch on the train and have two smaller stops, so one in the morning and a smaller one in the afternoon as well. And that is the overall program. It's a shorter program. It's a 9-day tour overall. So with hotel nights front and back in Santiago and in Seville. So that makes it a nice, even 1-week tour in style, as you can see here.
Yeah, perfect. We'll touch on a couple of the highlights here. And again, I love these cities in Spain because each one is sort of more magnificent than next, depending on whether you go south to north or north to south. Talking about starting up in the north in Santiago de Compostela, this is an incredible city, one of the 3 holy cities in the world, where if you're Catholic, you can go and absolve your sins. But of course, if you're not Catholic, it's still a good reason to go, because the cathedral here with the spires that you see is beyond magnificent. I mean, you know, there's cathedrals and there's cathedrals, but this is really one of the ones. And Santiago is also quite well known as the end of the Camino de Santiago. There's multiple pilgrimage routes, so there's so much history in this Spanish city and in this capital of Galicia. I don't know what else is there to say about we'll undoubtedly spend more time in Santiago before this program even starts, because it's the kind of city that you need to spend at least a day or two just wandering around on your own.
Yeah, you should. Just generally on this tour, this is a tour that's maybe a little odd for the classical Spanish routes, because we go north to south, or south or north.
Right.
And Santiago is mostly not on everyone's list because it's not the classic, if you will. For those of you who don't know Galicia northwestern, just above Portugal. It's very green. Some say it's like Ireland with more sunshine and no Guinness, which is not the worst if you think, you know, there's no Guinness, but a lot of white wine. And the city itself has a lot of appeal. We have people saying it looks like a Harry Potter movie, you know, something like that. It has a Celtic. There you go. That's some landscape there, reminiscence of what you have on the British Isles. And it's Spain, and then you go further down towards central Spain, and it becomes to, you know, what you know as Spain, with Toledo, the classical Castilian castles and landscapes. Here you have Imperial City, which actually was bigger and more important than Madrid in a time. And then you go, sorry?
It used to be the capital of Spain back in the day. It
used to be the capital, exactly. And then you go further down to Seville, and then you have, of course, what everyone raves about being typically Spanish, or Cordoba, also in Andalusia, with the reminiscence of the Muslim empire for 700 years. And then in Seville, you'd have flamenco and Spain in a nutshell, if you will. So you have all of that in 1 week, with a couple of stops along the way in Avila, the wall that we've seen before in the image. So it's actually a great mix of the classical stuff that you have to see if you've never been to Spain, and then also the slightly out of the way things in Galicia. So it makes it actually quite a compelling tour.
And exactly, I think that's the interesting part. And of course, I mean, Galicia being sort of an autonomous state within Spain, the culture, the language, you know, the food is so different. No different than Catalonia, as an example, is an autonomous region of Spain, and that's why it's almost like sort of separate countries. And I know many of our members have traveled to Spain before. I mean, a lot have been in Barcelona and Madrid, sort of the classics. But it's these other cities that for me sort of scream what Spain is, and the diversity and all the rest of it. And of course, you know, talking about briefly Cordoba, you know, 3 of the world's major religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, all coexisting, you know, historically in this space, in this city, peacefully. and it just adds a character to it. Cordoba has the largest mosque in the world as well, which is quite remarkable. You don't really think about that. We associate Spain with huge cathedrals and all that sort of thing. So indeed, I think the combination of cities on this trip makes it particularly fascinating. And so if we were to summarize three great reasons to go on this trip, I would say that it's the Orient Express, or it's almost that caliber of train. The only difference being is it's casual, right? So if you want to take the Orient Express, which by the way is about $3,500 US for one night on the train, no shower, and so the Al-Andalus is a similar caliber in terms of the luxury and the compartments and the dining on board, but at a lower price. You get good bang for your buck on that program. And what were we saying were the other sort of compelling reasons for this trip?
The other compelling reasons would be that well, the way the tour is made, from north to south or south to north, you have these really nice mixture between the classic and the outstanding, the not so, or the slightly off the beaten track. That's a double pun intended, I should say. Cities or places, and it is also, as you said, you get bang for the buck, but it is for 1 week. I know that many Canadians, they go to Europe, and then they, for a program like this, you probably stay on longer and do another country or prolong in Spain itself. So you can actually have that as an element of 8-9 days of this tour, and then do something
Exactly
else. So it's actually quite nice if you have something else in Europe going, and then do this as a highlight or as a start, any which way you want.
And so Fran asked a question about price point on this, because we haven't actually formalized the itinerary on it. I would guesstimate that this program for the 9-night itinerary is probably around 10 or 11,000 Canadian dollars, give or take. And again, that's pretty much all inclusive, because your meals are all included in your excursion. Like it's a full package. So
I always have to wrap my head around the Canadian dollar thing.
No, exactly. Canadian dollar, we're only about 70% as good as our friends to the south. So
yeah, but you're right. It comes around the 10,000 to 11,000. Depends on the category, of course.
Yeah,
and
of course.
So that's the ballpark. Yeah.
That is indeed the ballpark. And so once again, just to wrap this particular program up, what do you think about this? Is this the type of thing that would be interesting for you, that you'd like to find out about if we decide to offer later on, or no, not so much? That's not so much up your alley. Again, this is for people who appreciate the sort of, call it the finer things of life, and that luxury travel aspect of it. Even the hotels that we have in this program are really top notch. It's all consistent. So this is again like an Orient Express kind of level of trip. That's the benchmark that I use, and I refer to it because people, it's the one train trip that is kind of iconic and people know about. So if you haven't already, please just let us know if that sounds interesting or not so much. And then we'll jump onto the final program today. And the Trans-Siberian probably doesn't need much introduction. It is, we title it in our brochure, the iconic Trans-Siberian Railway. It is an iconic journey because, of course, it is the longest in the world at over 9,000 kilometers from one end to the other, and crossing through 7 time zones, Tim?
It used to be more, and then someone in the Kremlin said it's too many time zones, so he scooted them together because he can do that. And now it's 7 time zones, yeah.
So the program goes between Moscow and Beijing, or I should say the program that we are doing in September of 2021. The traditional Trans-Siberian actually is just in Russian territory. So it actually ends in Vladivostok, which is a naval base on the Pacific Ocean. But the one that I think is more popular, Tim, would you agree, is the one that goes through Mongolia. So it actually is then the Trans-Mongolian Express and ends up then in Beijing. So let's talk a little bit about this train. And so category-wise, again, we're talking about something similar again to the Orient Silk Road Express. Tell us about the train. And I know you've been on this one tons of times, so you know every inch of it.
Sort of, yes. But none of the trips that I've taken was all the way through. I've always done parts and chapters.
Yeah, right.
So in the end, it probably makes up for 2 good journeys. Let me just, because I see the picture of one of the dining cars here. You have groups of 4 and a small bar in the background. There's usually 4 of these, 3 or 4 of these on a setup, so you don't have to walk as far. So they're at different points on the train. Even though it looks quite fancy. Gordon, you mentioned that, you know, we as a train company, we would like to travel in style, but it's not about dressing up and having all that status that maybe the the classical Venice Simple and Orient Express has, or this British style. We'd like to do it casual, and I think that many of our travelers, they appreciate that, they want to do it exactly for that. Nonetheless, you know, if you have a bar car or a restaurant car like this, much appreciated. So you have 3 or 4 of these, depending on how long we do the train. This is an example of just one of the corridors. I think this is one that is the nostalgic comfort. It's an intermediate cabin category. Gordon mentioned this is something similar of the Silk Road Express, mainly because it's also Soviet. This is the Russian stuff. Yes, but it has more. There's a wider range of categories. A classic compartment, lower 2 berth, much like the ALADIN on the Orient Silk, on the Silk Road Express. And here you have, this is the setup is 2 people per cabin, low berth, and then a sharing shower on one end of the cabin. Obviously, you traveling in a group, we do put all of you in one carriage, if you will. So there's no one is scattered around with other people. Another example, it's the same size, but it has a different interior. It's the Superior Plus cabin, but essentially it doesn't give you more space. It just gives you a different layout. And I may say, for example, in this case, the Superior Plus is always linked right next to the restaurant car. So you don't have to walk as far. The others, you might have to walk through a couple of these. And by the end of the journey of a Trans-Siberian, you know doors. That's I can tell you that. That's part of the fun. And the nostalgic comfort. That is a curious one. This used to be a carriage that was used by Khrushchev. I think he was the first Soviet leader after Stalin, I think. And he used this one to travel around Russia, and it got refurbished, obviously, nice wooden interior, and it's a semi-ensuite. Semi-ensuite meaning two cabins share one small shower in the middle. If you enter from one side, the other one gets locked, and vice versa.
And so when you say shower, but there's a shower and a toilet in that compartment, yeah?
No, there's no toilet. There's just a shower and a sink, just for washing up. If it was a shower, if it was the toilet, I think that would be awkward. So this is because there's comfortable ones on both sides of the carriage. No problem with that. And it's also, this one is also right next to a dining car. So you don't want to walk as far. This is the go-to cabin.
That's the one to go to.
That's the one to go to. And then we'd have slightly more modern, what you call a Bolshoi cabin. Bolshoi meaning big. You can already see it's a bunk bed style because you have a private shower and bathroom, complete bathroom on one side. There's two of these very similar cabins. The Bolshoi Platinum, as the Platinum explains, is much the same layout, just bigger, more space, and it's essentially all, of course, for two people. For one, it's ample space for one.
And so I think it raises a good question about all of the compartments that are the majority of it. So the majority of people going on this train will book into a classic or a superior, perhaps a nostalgic, where your toilets are at the end of the carriage. And so can you tell us briefly what's that like? Because I know that for a lot of people that's a little bit of a, oh my god, it's a shared washroom, and is it going to be dirty, and now I'm going to be standing in somebody else's pee or whatever, like, but that's not the case at all from the feedback I've gotten.
Tell us what that is. That can't be the case. That's not the standard we would operate on. No, obviously, one should know that private trains or train stock in Russia, and this is the tradition in Russia because they have a long-standing train culture. There's a lot of people on, well, this is public trains, but it's much used in a country that's as big as it is. On the train stock, they always have the staff comes with the carriage. So all the carriages that we always have the same. There's always two people doing shifts, and they look after the entire carriage and the guests, which means there's a rigid cleaning protocol. So several times a day, you will have the cleaning of the shower and the bathrooms, and of course they do the service. If you want tea, if you want something small to eat, they will bring it to you. They make the bed in the morning, and then before when you're at dinner, they do the fold down, and then fold up again after when you're at breakfast. So all of that will be done several times a day. Now with the situation now, we've changed the hygiene protocol completely. So it's even more severe. So you should feel comfortable. It's always clean. It works. And also because if you travel in a group like you guys, you know each other, and of course you have your cabins right next to each other. So it feels much like a group. You know the people who are going to use the shower as well. So that's a different approach.
Yeah, no, and as I say, I think that we've had positive feedback. There's apprehension about how it all works, but it works well, and it is super well German-run operation, even if it's Russians that are providing the services. Give us the rundown of the day on board. Again, similar, I think, to the programs we've just described, but because we're covering a larger ground, more ground in the course of the journey, we spend a bit more time on the train.
We spend a little bit more time on the train. That means also because we're traveling through time zones. We don't have, well, the Orient Express has, I think there's one change between Kazakhstan, a 1 hour change between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, but here you have a lot more time, and depending on where we travel eastbound, so we lose 1 or sometimes even 2 hours in one day. Meaning we sit down for dinner at say 7 and you get up and it's 10 and you only spend 2 hours with dinner. So the evening goes by quite fast, but it essentially it has the same setup as before. We travel through the night. This one has to travel a lot of distance during the night, so it goes all the way through, and then during the day, depending on where we are, sometimes we get off around 9, sometimes we get off later. We get off after an early lunch, and we'd have a visit of one of the stops. Or in the meantime, when we travel a lot on the train, also during the day, we would have, as you have here, like a Russian basic language class given by one of the guides in the dining car, or lectures, or we'd have different things like the tea ceremony or the tea style, Russian style presentation, explanation, a little bit of history, background. All of that takes place. And then next, you're in China.
Next thing you know. And I think it's important to know as well, particularly on this program, but actually with the Orient Express, the Orient Silk Road program, is that we do have days off train. So there are on the itinerary between Moscow and the China-Mongolia border, we have 2 nights off the train where we we check into a hotel. So you get a proper hotel room, you have a real shower in your own shower, and so on. So, and that adds a little bit to the journey, because it's a fairly long trip. You cover a lot of ground.
Absolutely. I think it's important to know that, there's, you need a lot of vodka, as you can see here, sometimes.
Sometimes not everybody likes the vodka.
Sometimes not everyone likes their vodka.
Or maybe it's tea.
Yeah, the hotel nights off the train, good thing that you mentioned it. Obviously, front and back is always hotel nights in Moscow and in China. But it kind of like alleviates a little bit the train traveling. It's as cool as we all find it, after a little bit of time, a shower that's not moving is appreciated. So yeah, no, that all of our trips are made that way, with the exception of the Al-Andalus, which is short.
Yeah, exactly. Just one question came up from one of our members: how crowded are the trains? And so well, obviously it's only as crowded as the number of compartments on a carriage. But give us an overview of the layout, because even though the Trans-Siberian might have multiple, many carriages if you have a particularly larger number of people, but it's segmented a bit. So it's because you don't ever have to walk sort of from the locomotive all the way to the caboose, so to speak.
If you did that, you'd lose a lot of pounds, because you actually run about 650 meters every time. It's a really long train. In Russia, because of the technology they have there with the trains, you can make the trains a lot longer than in Europe, for example, or in Canada. And this results in that we can actually make the train, quite long. We'd have to have that, because if you calculate in the restaurant cars, we always have one carriage with just necessary stuff that we have to have technology-wise with us for the restaurants and for the staff and so on. We have a staff wagon all the way in the back, all of that. And then we'd have it's 15 carriages just for the compartments. And depending on the category, you'd have between 16 people, or in the BOLSHOI, it would only be 10 people if it's maxed out. We'd have a lot of single travelers, so it's less that. But still, you'd walk through probably 2, 3, 4 carriages, front and back, to the restaurant car. And depending on how sold we are, you'd need half a carriage or 3/4, something like that. Yeah. But never more than the actual possibility.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Let's finalize by taking a quick look at sort of the most important stops along the Trans-Siberian. Of course, we begin or end, depending on the direction, in Moscow. Hardly needs any introduction. A truly amazing city. And again, I know that some of our members have been to Moscow, in the context of another program. I mean, how do you describe Moscow in a few words? I mean, grandiose is the one that comes to mind.
Biggest city in Europe, if you count, Western Russia to be part of Europe. And essentially, it's hustling and bustling, and from the impressive underground stations to the most modern skyscrapers in Europe, and everything in between. It's a very rich city, and something with a lot of history. So, in a nutshell, so to speak.
Yep. And so, I mean, we obviously make stops every day. We're not going to cover them all. It's obviously described in more detail in in our program because, as I say, we are going on this trip in next September. But we'll stop as well in Yekaterinburg, which I mean, its claim to fame is obviously where the last Tsar family, the last royal family of Russia, were executed, bringing that whole era to an end. But it's also sort of the gateway to the Urals, which separates Europe and Asia. And you know, I'm intrigued by it. I think it was named a European Center of Culture or something not that long ago, some years back.
Some years back, it was, yes, that's right. And I think, I mean, one of the points exactly was that it's, you know, seen from the east. It's the first European city that you meet after the Ural Mountains. We actually go with the groups. We go. It's a little bit outside of the city. You'd have a small monument where you actually have the division between here you are in Asia and here you are in Europe. So you can actually, you know,
so you can walk from Europe to Asia. So
yeah, exactly. So you have that, and then you'd have the history parts where you have the cathedral here in the foreground that was built in reminiscence of the Romanovs, the last Tsars of the revolution. And it used to be also in Soviet times, you know, one of the closed up cities, you know, the no-go zones. So there's numerous, you know, sides of history to it. No, important place.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. And a couple of days later, we come to Novosibirsk, and I remember having as a kid a fascination with this town because it's like sort of on the other side of the world from where we are, and it's you know, the capital of Siberia. Which, you know, what do you think of when you think of Siberia? You think about bears and forest and all the rest of it, but this is a gigantic city. I mean, it's the third largest in Russia.
This is here in Europe. Novosibirsk is the epitome of the meaning of the middle of nowhere. For Europeans, we don't have a lot of space and we don't have any deserts, and so if they, you know, so like Novosibirsk, it means, you know, you're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And this is the third biggest city in Russia after Moscow and St. Petersburg, first of all. So it's 1.5 million or close to 2 million. It has one of the biggest fluvial ports with the Ob River flowing through there, and the biggest opera house east of Moscow in the entire continent. So it's quite something. It's not the prettiest place I've ever been. I admit that freely, but that's only because I've been to Spain and been.
But this is, I mean, this is part of the reason of going on a trip like this, is because, you know, you want to see this sort of Russian brutalist architecture. I mean, you know, we don't expect to see, you know, Paris in the middle of Siberia. We expect to see, well, Novosibirsk, and so
exactly. Yeah.
But for me, one of the highlights of the trip, I think, is Lake Baikal, which, you know, I mean, we are no strangers to lakes in Canada, but Lake Baikal is yet on another level. I mean, the most voluminous freshwater lake in the world. And as I understand it, the train goes on a separate set of tracks again, or not the usual route, so that we actually take in some of this amazing scenery.
Yeah, that is certainly the highlight, or one of the highlights on this trip. But before we get there, we get to the city of Irkutsk, which is not quite at Lake Baikal. It's about a half-hour drive outside or outside of the lake. And this one that's a gem. That's that's wooden houses and really classical Siberian architecture, not really big. So I think it's 500,000 or something. And we spent an overnight in the hotel there, and then we get to the lake with the train, and we actually get to get through the tracks that used to be part of the original tracks that have been used until they finished the whole line until Vladivostok, right outside or right alongside the lake for about a 80 to 90 kilometer way, which we will do very slowly. And weather-wise, if the weather's is good, which most of the time it is, because it's in the middle of the continent, there's very little rain during the summer. We do a picnic right outside there, what you can see here, and you can bathe in the lake if you want. They say that if you bathe in there, you'd gain five years of life. That's what the Russians say. Obviously, we make it easy. Afterwards, you get a shot of vodka because you need it, because it's very cold, even in the summer.
I can imagine it's very cold.
It is actually, you mentioned it. It's Lake Baikal has as much sweet water as all of the 5 big lakes combined.
The Great Lakes, our Great Lakes.
The Great Lakes, sorry. The Great
Yeah.
Lakes combined, and it's very impressive. And
Very,
for
very
the Russian culture, it's almost like a holy place.
Yeah, indeed. And undoubtedly a highlight on the trip. From roughly from here is when the train heads south. So we vary off the Trans-Siberian route, heading into Mongolia, and through the incredible terrain of the Gobi Desert, and then we hit Ulaanbaatar, which again is one of those cities that we kind of heard of, but next to Novosibirsk is just beside the middle of nowhere, and quite a striking city. Not necessarily the most architecturally beautiful one, but
again, no, but very different from Novosibirsk. This actually, there's a lot of movement right now. Obviously, it's growing economically, but as you can see, this is the parliament on the central square in Ulaanbaatar. Ulaanbaatar has about 1/3 of all of the population of Mongolia in the city or around. That makes it like almost 1 million. And what you see here is again the parliament. In the middle of the entrance there's a big sculpture of none other than Genghis Khan, obviously, the big creator of Mongolian Empire. So that's very different than what you will see around Ulaanbaatar or in Mongolia itself, because we also offer to spend the night that we have a hotel night there. But if you say, I want to have the real deal, I want to experience it like the Mongolians do, and most of them have a gur or yurt, in which way you pronounce it, one of these typical tents. You can spend the night out in one of these tents. Don't worry, it's not basic. It has normal beds in there, and there's a small oven that gets heated. Like every 2 hours, someone comes into your yurt and lights the fire during the night, because it gets quite cold during the night. Even though the daylight, you'd have 15-20 degrees Celsius, it will get cold during the night. So you'd have that heating, you'd have that feeling. Outside you have horses, or you have you can hear the scenery with the animals, and in the morning you can take a hike. So that is a possibility to enrich this trip as well.
Yeah, and to experience that sort of real Mongolian culture, and I think it would be definitely an exciting and a different way to experience a night. From here, our train trip gradually winds up, and this is where Wheel and Anchor takes. In the case of the program that we're doing next year, we deviate from where the rest of the group is. And we will, at the border between Mongolia and China, and the rest of the group will wait several hours for a train, a Chinese train, because they have a different gauge in China. So the train cannot pass through from Russia to China. But we're going to hop on a coach because we want to carry on and see the next stop. And we put on a special program where we're going into Datong, which is a city that's actually not that far from Beijing. It's only a couple hours away, but it has 2 rather spectacular sites. I have not been and seen them, but I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this for our members to see the Hanging Monastery and the Yungan Grottos. Tim, you were saying they are really as dramatic as you sort of see from the picture.
Yeah, it's the hanging monastery. You'd wonder how did they construct it? I mean, they didn't have glue to put it on there. That's for sure. Um, but it somehow looks like it. It's quite high up there, and the structure is just made like to fit into the rock itself. Um, that's one. That's one of the two highlights, and the other one, the Yungan Grottos, is an assembly of rooms where you have Buddhist sculptures and statues, and from in all sizes. From the small ones, very ornamental, to huge ones, 20, 30 meters high.
Wow.
And you have several of these. I think you have 36 rooms, or grottos where some you can enter, some you just see from the outside, and that is quite an assembly. And before I was there, I have not heard of it. Everyone knows of the terracotta soldiers in Xi'an. This is very different. But it's equally impressive. So these two make up the Datong stay. Very, very nice one on the way to Beijing.
Yeah, it's really a great stop. We'll spend a couple of nights there so we can really take in those unique sites. Ending up the trip, of course, we'll end up in Beijing. We'll stop at the Great Wall. Even if you've been to the Great Wall before, for me, I've been there a number of times, and it is one of those places in the world that always sends a chill down my spine, or not a chill down. It's in a positive sense. Like it is such a powerful place to be. So we'll stop there. And we'll end up the trip in Beijing and visit the usual sites, and as well as the Summer Palace, which is one of the more unusual sites that we'll see in our last few days in Beijing. And with that, we will have traveled almost all the way from across the continent, and we'll have a tremendous experience aboard this Trans-Siberian Railway. I think the top three reasons why one would consider this trip, well, it goes without saying, it's the longest train journey you can do in the world. So, I mean, in terms of bucket list items, that's got to be pretty close to the top. What are two other reasons that you would say that make this a particularly compelling train journey?
Well, the other ones I'd rather say would be three countries.
Yeah.
We do three countries, three capitals. Well, three of the biggest countries and three of the most known capitals: Moscow and Beijing for sure, and Mongolia. Well, Ulaanbaatar is much the odd one out, but three of the biggest countries you will visit, which also makes three cultures. Russian culture, Mongolian culture is very different from Chinese culture. They don't have any. Well, they have links, but they're very different. And then I would say you would also see during the Trans-Siberian Railway adventure, if you will, cities that you otherwise would not get to. I mean, you don't just fly to see Lake Baikal. You don't do that normally. No. You don't fly to Irkutsk.
Yeah. Or Yekaterinburg or Irkutsk or Novosibirsk. Again, this is the beauty of this kind of an adventure is that
exactly
you just get to places that most people aren't going to get to. Good. Well, as I mentioned, we are. First of all, what do you think about this program? This is to our members. Is this something that's of interest? Would you like to see the details when it's ready? We will have actually the program ready for our 2021 program as well. Although there is, we have quite limited space left. I think we've only got one cabin left, or maybe two.
John, we always make room for you. We always.
But you can always. But that's it. See, as Tim said before, we'll just add on an extra carriage. Well, but our members know my philosophy on our group sizes, yeah, so let us know. Are you interested? Is that something that would appeal to you for presumably 2022, or if we can accommodate, if you're interested for 2021, or nope, that's not the kind of trip for you. It's too long on a train, or whatever reason. Again, this just helps us to understand as we do our future programming. A question was raised by Judy about safety of travel in China because of the political situation. I think that the political situation in Russia is quite stable. China, obviously, there are some issues. And, like anywhere in the world, like anything, we are constantly on top of the news. We are constantly on top of the, health situation. And we react accordingly. I mean, obviously, it's we don't travel where it's not safe, full stop. And so we will see what happens as we move towards our various departures. But for the time being, let's hope that that everything goes according to plan. Did you want to say something on that point, Tim?
No, I was just in short, if it wasn't safe, if we'd feel that there was any issue, we wouldn't do the trip. Full stop.
Yeah, well, that's the bottom line. We couldn't do it. I mean, it wouldn't. So we share the same philosophy on that. Cost-wise, I mean, details on this program are available now, and so this program starts around 13 Canadian, based on a classic cabin for 2 people, and then goes up from there depending on the category. So we're happy to send that information along. And I note the comments from a couple people that are interested. So Paula will follow up with you. We'll let you know where that stands. And so, yeah, if you didn't already complete the poll, please do so. And just wrapping up the webinar, thank you all for your time. We've gone on a little longer than I planned. That was me, bad planning. Normally, I am very good at planning, but this one took a little longer. So thank you for your indulgence. Next week, November the 12th, we're going to be talking about a couple of very unique train journeys across South Africa and Australia. So please join us for that. If you have any questions, please let us know. You can also send us an email. I know we've had you on for a long time this morning, so I appreciate your time. You can drop us an email. We're happy to answer your questions. If you do have any now, please type them into the box. Yeah. Tim, any final words before we say goodbye to our members? I'm just seeing if there's any other questions here.
No, thanks. Thanks for your for staying with us for about double the time that we planned. But when
it was a little bit longer than we planned, but anyway, we covered a lot of ground.
Gordon and me gets chatting, exactly, then it's fun to do. Thank you all for your interest. Love to answer any questions that you might have, or Gordon will send them to me if there's anything coming up post this one or next one. And maybe we see each other in September next year, or the one after that.
Yeah, indeed. Tim, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you joining us all the way from Berlin. Thanks to all of our members, and we'll catch up with you next week. And so have a wonderful rest of your day.